Hey, Through Crosses family, welcome back to the podcast. My name is AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship, and today we are continuing our series titled The Hope Within You. We'll be looking at Mark chapter 4, verses 26 through 29 today, and having a great discussion about how to share the hope that is within you. And so we have a great conversation in store. Before we get into that, I just want to keep you updated on what's happening here at Three Crosses. And so first, we'd love for you guys to fill out our podcast survey. You can find out more at threecrosses.church/podcast. Tell us who you are, where you're listening from, and you can redeem a free drink at Neighborhood Coffee. Second, if you haven't joined us at Life Group Nights, we'd love to invite you on Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8 to join a group and discuss what we're talking about in this Hope Within You series. And so you can learn more about that group at threecrosses.church/lifegroupnight. Okay, we have a great conversation in store about sharing the hope that is within you by asking a lot of questions. So we have a lot of questions in store for you today. And so with that, let's go deeper. Joining us to unpack this question-filled episode about the hope within you, Austin Payne, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it's good to be back.
We're bound to have a lot of fun. We always do.
Always.
And we're in a short text today, but there's so much to talk about in this topic. So I'm excited to see where this goes. Mark 4, verses 26 to 29. And so it reads, "He," being Jesus, "also said, 'This is what the kingdom of God is like.'" He goes on to explain, "A man scatters seed on the ground." So I want to freeze on those statements really quick. A man scatters seed. This is obviously imagery that Jesus uses a lot, this sower of seeds. Even in Mark chapter 4 earlier on, he tells the famous parable of a farmer going out to sow his seed and it landing on all the different paths. And we'll get to those paths in this episode. And we see that some of the seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, produced crop, multiplying 30, 60, some 100 times. That's another thing I see about seeds here is later in Mark 4, we're going to see this mustard seed that falls into the good soil. It grows. And I bring all this up because some of us, right off the bat, might not even think of ourselves as people scattering different seeds.
Right.
Like I think of my life and I'm like, I'm not like actively like throwing seeds out. I don't, it's kind of an identity or a role that if it wasn't in the scriptures, I may not think of myself right away. And so I see it here, man scattering seed. We see multiplying crop. And one of the phrases that I loved in talking about this message came out in our conversations. Evangelism is who you are, not what you do.
Yeah.
And so I was really struck by that. So just to start off with, zoom out a little bit, help us connect the dots to God's story, the gospel, and how that leads to you becoming a person that scatters seed.
Yeah.
Like, how do we adopt that role in God's story in the gospel?
Yeah. First of all, quick caveat, my voice is like trash right now. So if I start sounding like Batman, I apologize. Where's Rachel? But yeah, I think like my mind immediately jumps to God being a God of covenants. And so all throughout scripture, you see God make covenants with his people, right? And the Mosaic covenant specifically was one of the things that I was reading through, thinking about this concept of evangelism as something we are, not something we do, right? It's like, it's not a on-off switch.
Right.
And I think, first of all, like, just caveating this whole conversation, like, I don't feel like this is like for you, our listener. I feel like this is like for me. Like, this has been super convicting for me. I look at like the Larry Volds of the world that, like, I've seen Larry's lists where he's like, here's the 10 people I'm praying for, like, for opportunities that God would open up doors, like, so I can have conversations with them. And I'm like, ugh. Like, Larry's probably that guy on an airplane that could, like, lead somebody to, like, the sinner's prayer and, like, baptize them when they land. And I'm like, you're so cool, Larry. Like, I admire that a ton about him. And I want to be more like that. But sometimes, like, there's this like, caveat of, like, oh, that's just not me. Or, like, I don't have the gift of evangelism. And I feel like we've been talking about that for the last couple of months on this podcast of like, what do those gifts mean? Can you opt in? Can you opt out? Is that a good excuse? Right. And I think one of the things Patty said in sermon review that was convicting for me was, she's like, most of us, it's not that we don't share the gospel or evangelize because of all the excuses that we give, right? Like for me, I'm like, I don't know if I have like the right doctrine. Like, I don't know if I want to, I'm going to run into something that I can't answer. Like, who am I to say what's right? Like, I don't want to be that guy that's like the Christian that's like sits down and it's like, hey brother, like, are you a sinner? And I'm like, like that part of that just kind of makes me, it gives me a little like ick. But Patty said, she was like, I feel like most of us don't evangelize because of like apathy and laziness. And I was like, oh man, like that's so convicting. Because I think that's probably the case for me. Is like most of the time it's apathy, which should not be the case if I really do believe what I believe. And yet I think like as I zoom out to answer your real question, when God makes his covenants with his people, like you're either in that covenant or you're not, right? So like we use the phrase in Omega or high school ministry a lot, like worship is something you are, not something you do. And so the question is not if you will worship, the question is like who or what you will worship. Like our hearts are idol factories. Like that's why the first 3 commandments have to do with idolatry. Like we are people that worship. And I think in a similar vein, evangelism, which like to break that down, what does that mean? I think evangelism is creating inroads for spiritual conversation, right? Okay. I don't think it's necessarily like I have to walk somebody through the Romans road and then draw a line in the sand and ask them if they're going to take a step over that or not. Sometimes, maybe, right? And I've had those moments in my life where like all of a sudden a door opens. Like I remember being in South Africa and we were on this mission in the middle of nowhere and we ran into this like Peace Corps gal and we literally had that gospel conversation. And I was like, afterwards, I was just like buzzing. Like that was so cool that I got to have like such an explicit evangelism moment. But that's not always my experience. Like I sat last week at an airport with this gal who was like a yacht attendant, and she sits by herself next to my wife and I. We're eating burgers in this restaurant, and Paige just goes like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, where are you headed? You headed home?" Inroads to a conversation, and it turned spiritual kind of, because what do you do? I'm a pastor, right? It's like, It goes there quickly. But she's like, oh, I haven't darkened the door of a church in forever. And so like, there's moments where it goes there, and there's moments it doesn't. But I think like where the covenant tie-in comes for me is like, I go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, which is a random place to go with evangelism. But
you would think Matthew 28 or Acts 1, but
totally
Deuteronomy chapter 4.
Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5, right? It says, which I love Deuteronomy because it's just Moses' flyby of everything that happened. And there's some funny moments. But he says this in verse 5, see, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all the decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them, the way the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him? And what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I'm setting before you today? Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget these things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Right? And then you turn the page, God gives his people the 10 commandments, or Moses is remembering this, right? And then Deuteronomy 6 is Shema, right? These are the commands, decrees, and the laws that the Lord your God directed me to teach you and to observe into the land you are crossing over to the Jordan to possess, so that your children and their children after them may fear God, which is the goal of evangelism, your God, as long as you live, by keeping all of his decrees and commands, which is the goal of evangelism. You want people to keep God's decrees, keep God's commands, so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And then he goes on to this, like, impress them on your children, talk about them when you sit and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, tie them as symbols in your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them down on the door frames. Like, it's just like, live this way. Like, it's not a, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's like, make this lifestyle. Like, remember. Right? 352 times explicitly, the nation of Israel is told to remember. Right? 87 times God goes, I'm the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, who brought you out of the land of slavery. So I think there's this like invitation to respond to what you're hearing, right? That word Shema means hear. And then it's not just this emotion of love for God, but it's like this decision of devotion, of will, of emotion, of mind, of heart. And then really, like, I think he's giving the nation of Israel an option, right? He's like, there's only one true God, and any other way degrades humanity, destroys community. So it's not do or don't. It's like live life and life abundant, or don't live. Like it feels like breathe or don't, right? Like be a Christian or don't. Like I recently, Paige asked me about, I can't remember, we were talking about some community in a past that I was a part of, and she's like, but were they Christians? And I was like, kind of.
What does that mean?
And she's like, that's not a thing. And I was like, you're right.
Kind of Christian.
Yeah, like and I think that's where maybe evangelism, if somebody asked me, like, are you an evangelist? I'd be like, kind of. But maybe that's where I'm feeling convicted with this conversation is I'm not sure that's a thing. Like in prepping for this message, I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine where I'm like, what is evangelism? Like, is it standing with the sign, that's like, repent, the lake of fire is coming, you're a sinner? Or is it preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words? And like for me, what I told my buddy as we were talking on the phone, I was like, I kind of just want to be like middle ground. And he's like, no, there is no middle ground. Like there's real and there's not real. Like live into it or don't. Like there's no tension between lake of fire and preach the gospel at all times. And like, I think he understand what I was getting at, but I also like, I like that conviction that I felt in that moment of like, oh yeah, like I think I do try to be kind of this cool middle ground sometimes. And when I look at scripture, I don't think that's what we're invited into, right? To go to Matthew 28.
Yeah.
11 disciples, go therefore,
right?
Make disciples of all nations. Like it's not an optional thing. It's like you either do this and reach the nations or you don't. And I think that's where the conviction comes in.
Which is kind of a daunting reality. Where it's like if you haven't thought of yourself as a seed planter before, and now all of a sudden like you're either in or you're out. You're either a seed planter or you're not. And that's what I love about the Old Testament reference, right? So the Old Testament reference here is going back to even Genesis 12 of God developing this nation so that they could be a blessing to others. And that's what it really was, is the way they lived, the way they acted, their very being would become a testimony and would testify to the other nations around them. And I love that even when they messed up, they were still built into that. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more on the new covenant now. So like how does the gospel, because I can imagine people thinking like, well, the gospel is like my personal decision and like I don't want to like impose it on anybody else. How does the gospel lead us to become seed planters?
Yeah, it changes everything it should change everything about the way that we live our life, right? Which is why we talked about this extensively in sermon review. Like I think adult conversions typically lead adults to being like, I can't stop talking about this. Whereas if you're a little bit more like me, I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't in a faith community. I don't have like a specific moment of conversion. I have like off ramps, we've talked about that before on this podcast of like seasons where I feel like I got off the freeway and I drove for a few miles, like up a road, and God's like, my guy, what are you doing? Just like ignoring the GPS. It's like, hit a U-turn. I'm like, nah, I'm good. So I don't feel the same weight that I see adult conversions have, which like, maybe this is a funny analogy, but do you ever read a book and then it's like all you can think about afterwards? Or watch a movie or a show or something, and you think about like, what are my friends doing right now? Like who are in the show? I just read Shoe Dog, which is the Phil Knight story. The Nike story of Nike. Phenomenal book, highly recommend. But if you're into entrepreneurial things and such, but one of the things I thought was fascinating about Shoe Dog was he wrote his like senior paper on Japanese shoes being imported into America to a class full of, like he presented it to a class full of people that were just like yawning, like boring. But for him, it was just like his singular passion. So he ends up like obviously like flying over to Japan, strikes a deal with this company over there, starts importing shoes. But then there's like a movement of people around him that like it catches fire, you know, like he's selling shoes out of the trunk of his car, and then he ran track at Oregon. And so these other runners and these other coaches and these other track meets, like he's going and he's showing them a product, like a running shoe that's so much better than anything on the market at the time. And it just like catches on, not because of like some sales pitch, but because it's like real, like there's something to it. And for, 10, 15 years, he does this without really making any money. Like it's just like every time they make money, he just doubles down on how much he's ordering from Japan, and then just doubles down again and doubles down again. So to the point where there's like no cash flow. Like everybody was like, this is a terrible business model, until now it's, worth billions of dollars. But I think like the premise, the point is, to the disciples post-resurrection encountering Jesus, like there wasn't an option at that point. And this is where like new covenant comes in. Like it is by grace you have been saved, not your works. So there's nothing you can do. Like no, you cannot boast. But then it's like to do the good works that God has prepared for you. And I think those like good works absolutely include like the Great Commission. And I think about like Acts chapter 2, these emboldened disciples, Peter, who just denied Jesus, going, this is my life. Like Paul, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. Like 11 for 11 disciples going to their death, proclaiming, like, how could I not talk about this? Like, how could I not, if heaven is real and hell is real and Jesus is returning, like we've talked about this on the podcast before, of like, they were so convinced Jesus was going to come back, right? Like it's transfiguration language. Like some of you will not taste death before you see the kingdom of heaven come. Like I think they heard that and were like, sick. Like, let's go then. Like, let's ride. Like, let's go and preach. Sure, imprison us, beat us, like shipwrecked. Great. Like bitten by snakes. Awesome. Like they just had such this laser focus that I think I crave. And it's convicting for me to go, I do think I treat church like a clock in, clock out job sometimes. I do think like I'm on vacation and somebody asks me what I do. And I'm like, I don't really want to tell you I'm a pastor. Like I'm off right now. I'm not clocked in. I'm on vacation. And I just think that's the wrong mindset. And I think that's where it's like this entire series and this like prepping for this is super convicting for me, because I want to be somebody that lives a little bit more in covenant, going like an evangelist is something I am. And I don't think that means I'm handing out tracts everywhere I go, but I do think it means I'm like looking for relational bridges within my spheres of influence to have real conversations about real things, right? Like if I am a tree producing fruit, then people should be able to like look and see that fruit. Like a tree is known by its like the whole discipleship, the thing that Jesus, he uses that analogy beautifully. Like there should be this palpable, obvious, I love the Lord with everything that I am, and I want to love the people around me, which is creating inroads to have real conversations. And I think people crave those conversations.
Yeah. And I think maybe some of you out there just resonated with that scenario that you brought up of, hey, this is my Tuesday. Like I'm not on Sunday and I'm clocked out of whatever faith background that I have. And so when somebody asks you a question like that, you might get caught off guard, or you might not know what to say. You might be so like afraid of rejection, apathetic, all these different hurdles that come up in that immediate moment. So I want you to imagine that moment out there, thinking, okay, if I had a conversation, what would I do?
Right.
And so this is where the text gets interesting, because the second part of this role is that a man scatters seed on the ground. And so I want to focus on that second phrase, because I think on the ground becomes a really important text here, because later in Mark 4, we hear about that parable of the seed scatterer, and we see that it's the farmer sowing the word. And we see that it's the ground that dictates what happens. And so some seed fall along the path, and so Satan or the birds come and take away the word. Some seeds fall on rocky places. They don't get enough roots. And then when trouble, persecution comes, it falls away. Some fall on thorns. The worries of this life, deceitfulness, choke it out. And then finally, the good soil. And I'm even thinking of Matthew 13 here, another parable of seed scattering, that an enemy comes and sows weeds among the wheat. And so what's interesting, I feel like it invites us to think about soil strategy. Like, what is our soil strategy? And I think of like, you brought up two scenarios where you're on the street corner, and I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. I was at a football game once, and I saw people with signs, and I mean, I didn't know what to think about it because
Yeah.
it feels like this is a person that's just like, I don't care where this falls. I don't care what ground it hits.
Right.
I'm just going to scatter seed everywhere.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you said, that famous attributed to St. Francis of Assisi.
Poor Francis.
Poor Francis.
If you're listening to this, Francis, we apologize.
Share the gospel at whatever costs, and if necessary, use words where you're living it out. You're saying, hey, this is my gospel life. And it feels like we have like a spectrum here. And it feels like in that one, if I had to change it to like a ground analogy, it's like you're almost waiting for like the perfect scenario of soil.
Right.
You're waiting for that one like thing, and then you'll plant the seed.
Right.
So you're playing it really safe. So we have somebody that's scattering seed everywhere. We have somebody that's playing it safe. What would you say is our good soil strategy? Should we be people that just throw seeds wherever? Should we wait until that perfect time? Like, how should we till the ground?
Yeah, man, it's so hard for me because I think like I sometimes can't get out of my own way with this, right? Like Austin Payne has his own presuppositions about what is right and what is wrong.
Sure.
And so like my gut reaction is like I look at the guy or the girl with the sign, the lake of fire sign, and I'm like, that's wrong. Like inherently, like I just go like that cannot be winsome.
Well,
Like
I think a lot of us are torn about that, right? Where it's like, okay, I get it, but like, ugh,
I know. I know. Like I low key like respect the boldness of like the pier preacher, like I think about like the Oceanside Pier. I used to live in North County, San Diego. There's always be people on like a bullhorn, like preaching. And I'm like, super sick. Like I respect your nerve. Like I want to stop. Maybe I should ask more often, like, hey, is this working? Like, are you having winsome conversations? And not like judgmental. I don't want to be like, is this working? Like really?
Yeah.
Like I kind of want to just like actually ask that question. Like, are you having gospel conversations? And if they are, like, I don't know, can God use that? Sure.
Right.
Like maybe somebody has had 5, 6, 7, 8 encounters, and that morning they were like, all right, Lord, like I'm ready to have a gospel conversation, and all of a sudden they go on a walk on the Oceanside
And then
Pier,
there's the bullhorn,
and there's somebody like bullhorning truth. Like maybe God can use that. I just feel like I'm at the point in my life where obviously I have so much to learn, but I think in my 20s, I had a very specific idea of what evangelism and like church should look like. And I remember I had a boss who like put his arm around me and was like, hey, do you think it's possible? There was this one guy at our church that I was always just kind of clashing with. And I was like, philosophically, I felt like the way that he was doing ministry was like, again, quote unquote, wrong. And he's like, is it possible that like Jesus could put his arm around you in heaven one day and be like, hey, let me show you the kingdom work that I did through, fill in the blank. And that was just a convicting moment for me to go like, what if it is possible for God to use this way or that way? Now, having said that, I do think it's up to each one of us to like discern and to like strategically steward the opportunities that are in front of us to the best of our abilities.
Sure.
So like one of the things I like about the bullhorn guy is like, he's the man in the arena daring greatly, like that famous quote of like, don't be a critic. Like, don't stand outside the game. So like anybody who would say like, that's wrong, I'd be like, low key, if I could whisper to you, I'd be like, I agree with you. Like, I don't think it's right either. But I think my follow-up question would be like, so what are you doing? Like, if you're not doing that, what is it that you are doing? And then that's where like on the other side is the Francis of Assisi. Like, well, I don't have to say anything because like my actions lead, which this, what I talked about, like main stage of my sermon was like no one in the history of the world has ever like helped an old lady across the street from Trader Joe's with her groceries. And that old lady has like turned to them and been like, maybe there was a Jewish carpenter 2,000 years ago that like was the son of the Virgin Mary and lived a perfect life, like sinless, and then died on the cross and raised himself 3 days again. And I'm going to like give my life to the Lord because of that. Like the gospel is inherently words. Like when necessary, use words. It's like, tell me when it's not necessary to use words to explain the gospel.
We have a book. Yeah.
So, I mean, I love, like Lauren Corbis brought this verse up in sermon review, and I love it. Like the Colossians 4, be wise in the way that you act towards outsiders, make the most of every opportunity, right? Which I think that's like probably the essence of the quote. Like if you're we've probably all encountered somebody that's like preached the gospel, but then you look at their life and you go like, question mark? It's like, do you live that out? And so I think it's necessary for us to be people, like Paul says, of like, be wise in the way we act towards outsiders, make the most of every opportunity. But then the next verse says, let your conversation, words, be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So I think that's where the combo comes in of the gospel is inherently words. It absolutely matters how you act. But I think like the essence of it is relationship, right? Like if we love people, then we're going to build relationship. And if we build relationship, I think that's where like the bridges get built in which like that gospel truth can travel over, which I think is like philosophically what I've given my life to. Like I do what I do because I believe in the fact that student ministries, junior high, high school, young adults are in the ripest season of their life to make decisions. Like if you just look statistically at the amount of decisions that are made for Jesus to surrender their life, to make him Lord of their life, like the vast majority of those are in that window. And so I think for me, like I'm just at this point in my life, and God can do whatever he wants with my life, but like I'm singularly passionate about building relational bridges with students and young adults, because I believe that once those relational bridges are built, truth can pass over that bridge, right? And I think that's where I struggle with the peer preacher, is like, where are those bridges? And maybe they're supernatural. Like maybe that's where God can move, right? Like I love this quote, like we don't need to understand how people grow spiritually, just trust that they can. Like people can grow spiritually. And if they can supernaturally, then that's where I go like, man, the best farmer in the world can't grow a crop. He just creates the best environment possible to grow crops. And so that's maybe just like the conviction for our listener and for myself is, what is that environment that you're fostering in your spheres of influence where like the crop of the kingdom can grow? And I can almost guarantee most of us would answer that with like, I'm probably not cultivating those environments enough. You know, like there's more that I could do, not in like a guilty way, but just in like a stewarding way. Like if I really believe this, and covenantally I am one of those people that has been like given the Great Commission, I can probably do more to build those bridges so that spiritual truth can pass.
So I think it's fascinating that we've talked about your role as a Christian in the new covenant. Like you're in this, you've been given a message of tremendous hope, the hope that's within you, the gospel message, literally the good news of salvation, the good news of Jesus Christ. And then we've surveyed the ground. We're figuring out, okay, what are the best ways to scatter this seed? Do we just throw it everywhere and hope that it falls, in which some cases it does? Or do we continue to cultivate different environments where this grows? And so I'm fascinated by the next line of this text in verse 27. It says, this is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground, and then we get night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. And I find it fascinating because I would imagine in this role, you're thinking, okay, like now I get to figure out, the mineral count of the soil, what kind of fertilizer it needs, like study the soil, study the terrain, study the environment. And the author just kind of goes, Jesus, being the author here, says he doesn't really know how it grows.
Yeah.
And so I'm really fascinated by this because in a lot of ways it reminds me of 1 Corinthians 3 that talks about I planted the seed, Paul is talking here, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. God makes all things grow.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what is the significance as we begin to talk about more practical, like how do we go about this? How do we go about this role of seed planting? What's the significance of starting with a lack of information? With a lack of information. He doesn't know how it happens. Like God's making it grow. I can imagine them looking at this plant and being like, this is a complete miracle. All we're doing is like tending to it and it's sprouting, it's growing roots, all these things. I don't know how it happens. I attribute it to God. So the lack of information of how this grows, why is this the crucial starting point of our role as seed planters?
Yeah, I think I'd go back to my farming analogy, I don't think there's a farmer in the world that really knows how their crops grow. Crazy statement. I'm not a farmer.
It's kind of a miracle.
But
if
I
you think
talked
about
to
it,
a lot
right?
of farmers. Like my brother-in-law is a massive potato farmer, like a dear friend of mine, Ryan Jackson. I was on the phone with him yesterday for like a half hour just talking about farming because I just like this analogy is so apt to me. And I think that's why Jesus uses it so much, right? First century agrarian culture. Like I think they got this to the deepest of their core that you don't really know how crops grow. Like you can build, you can provide the best possible environment, right? And that's why I think it's like the analogy is so good because it's like the farmer doesn't just sit back and go like, well, I don't know how crops grow, so
I give up.
I just give up, right? Throw
yeah.
a bunch of seeds out there. If it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? But I think that's how we evangelize. Like I kind of think we go like, well, we don't know how, and so like I just will say nothing. And if God brings that, if that person comes to me in the workplace and goes like, hey, you're a Christian, right? Then I'll have the conversation. And I think that's where, like, again, 0% of me is like saying this judgmentally. I think most of the time I preach, I feel like God just uses it in my life and I'm like, dang it. Like it's so personally convicting. But yeah, like I think the best farmers, like Ryan on the phone yesterday, he was just like, we're all in every year. Like, and I love that phrase. I was like, tell me more about that. He's like, all it takes is 2 bad years. And they're the single biggest stone fruit farmers in the world. Like this is not a small operation. This is like if you've ever heard of the, oh my gosh, pluot. I was blanking there for a second. Like they invented the pluot and it's so cool. Just like they're incredible human beings, love the Lord. And they have this huge farm. And I admire them a ton because the farm is like, they're like, we're all in every year. Like all it takes is 2 bad years for us to sink, like to go under. Like
Wow.
every farmer borrows on credit against their farm, against their crop to like plant the next year and get all the equipment and whatever. But it's like, if you go to your bank and say like, our farm didn't produce anything this year, they'll probably extend you 1 more year. And then if you produce nothing year 2, like you're done, you're toast. And so like the faith in some senses that it takes to go out and work, like absolutely work, like hire the right people, have the right strategy. Like they have hail cannons that they can fire at clouds to like break up hail clouds because hail can destroy it like a stone fruit.
Yeah.
Like the strategy that goes into it is so complex. So faith doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, but I think faith means like cultivate the single best environment you possibly can. And farming is like, I think farming is something you are, not something you do. Like I think you are a farmer and you're all in every year. And you go like, this is what we do. This is our life. But then I think the open-handedness comes when you're like, yeah, I don't really know how it grows. So it's like, I think that I don't know how it grows sometimes gets used as an excuse for apathy. But I think that there's almost a beauty to it when in that verse that you read of like, yeah, I did this, Apollos did that. God makes the seed grow.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where we as a faith community come together and go like, absolutely, I will work for the kingdom. And that doesn't mean church, that doesn't mean full-time ministry. It means like in your sphere of influence, you're building and scattering seed and like building those relational bridges. And I think there's like some practical ways we can get into that I think are compelling. But yeah, I don't think we know how the seed grows. I think it's magical. And I'm 10 years into like full-time ministry, like where this is my job literally. And I still, man, there's moments with high school students where I'm like, I don't get it. Like I would have, if I was a betting man, that kid was like so space cadet-y and like checked out and such a punk. And now he's like coming to me going like, hey, can I serve? Can I like do slides? Can I be on the worship? And I'm like, huh? But like I wake up thinking about ministry. I go to bed thinking about ministry, cultivating the best possible environment for like high school students in the East Bay to encounter the living God. So I think like I love what I do and it's still a mystery, but it doesn't mean that I just like, well, Lord, like bring the high school students that you would 2-3 crosses and like, we're going to have Omega weekly. And if students show up, great. And if they don't show up, great. I'm like, no, like I'm going to take 50 Chick-fil-A sandwiches to Castro Valley High School in Redwood. And we're going to try to get into the doors of Moreau and Mount Eden, all these places. And we're going to go out and we're going to have this like strategy so that high school students can hopefully encounter the living God and have everything about their life changed. But then I still don't know how that happens. Like when the lights turn on for a high school student, when the scales fall off their eyes, I'm still like, huh?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
genuinely, I don't know. I don't know what compels and what doesn't compel. I just know that we're going to try every strategy in the book and then keep trying and then keep trying and then keep trying
Hmm.
to create inroads so that students can encounter the gospel.
It feels like the scenario that you just created is, in my mind at least, is a farmer who can do everything to like strategically to create and protect that environment and cultivate it and do as best as possible in that environment. But ultimately, it's left up to God in a lot of ways.
For
And
sure.
so there's not knowing, there's a level of faith, of trust. And I think he doubles down on the next verse here where it says, all by itself, the soil produces grain, all by itself.
Right.
But then it says also, first the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. So there is a pattern that seems to be observed here. But again, I want to start with the all by itself clause, the soil produces grain, because it's a double down again on this idea that at some level, we have to let go and let God, allow God to work. And this is why I think this is a big portion of why we built this series and sermon around question asking. And so if you're following along in the groups in the curriculum, you'll notice that on day one, we began with just this word curiosity. And so asking questions like, what is your story? What is happening? Because you can't predict this stuff. And so there's some stats that we looked up that Jesus was asked around 180 or so questions. He only responds with 3 to 8 statements around there, depending what you define a statement. And so he's always asking questions. He's always asking questions.
Yeah.
What do you think the advantages of asking great questions are in a conversation with a non-Christian person out there?
Yeah. We talked about this in the sermon, but like it just like the concept of environments of love grow faith. Like I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody like debated into the kingdom. And that doesn't mean debates aren't important. I think apologetics is very important. I think like I have friends who grew up in youth groups where they asked hard questions of their youth pastors, and the youth pastor was like, I don't know, like let's just play more dodgeball. Like let's just love each other. And it's like, I think there should be room for theological depth and debate. But yeah, I think people meet Jesus more often than not in environments of care, environments of trust, environments of curiosity. And that's exactly what Jesus did, to your point, right? He asked questions, he listened. Jesus never once led with like, here's 5 theological proofs for like why the kingdom exists, right? He's like, what do you want? Who do you say that I am? Do you want to be well? Why are you so afraid? What are you looking for, right? Like the goal was never explanation. It was like meaningful invitation. Like God I love Jesus's methodology and the way that he invited people into it. So yeah, I think the question asking, what do questions do? They demonstrate care, they demonstrate curiosity, they build trust, right? Like I can't remember if I talked about this in the sermon or not, but like I love when I went on a date. This is like summer 2013. My boss up at Hume, he just like the only advice he gave me, he's like, hey, as you go on this date, like interested people are interesting people. I was like, whoa. And I've held on to that for 12 years.
Say that again.
Interested people are interesting people. And I think we can all imagine the date of the guy that's like just trying to be interesting. He's like, well, then I graduated from college and backpacked through Europe. And like, let me tell you about this one story. And it's like the girl's like sitting on the other side of the table, just like, oh my gosh. Like there's that awesome gif I think it's at like a Knicks game or something where the guy is just like whispering in a girl's ear, or he's like talking to her, like leaning way over. And she just has this like look of boredom on her face. And there's a million, like my favorite ones are the golf ones. It's like, and then on the 4th hole, I hit this shot on the right side. She's just like, I don't care. But I think oftentimes, like, I don't know. I feel like people just peacock like a lot. Like I feel like I'm around people a lot who try to talk about how interesting they are, and I for sure fall like I'm guilty of this as well. Like you go into an environment and you want to feel interesting, you want to feel important, you want people to like give you attention. But I think like my favorite people to be around are the people that just like ask really good questions. Like they're just genuinely, authentically interested. And I just wonder what would happen if Christians used that more often. Like if we just like took that tool, put it in our tool belt, just like, I'm just going to be an interested person. Like I'm going to get into the lives of my neighbors, and I'm going to get into the lives of my coworkers, and I'm going to get into the lives of whoever, I don't know, like the Tuesday night softball league, and just be interested. I'm just going to ask more genuinely good questions. And people around me, like they're going to know that I care. They're going to know that I'm curious. I don't know. I feel like there's not a human being on planet Earth that doesn't crave connection. And I think oftentimes like the spark for connection is curiosity and being interested and just asking more questions rather than like making statements. And statements get us in trouble, right? It's like,
Sure, yeah.
Especially like how polarized our nation is. Like I feel like if you just asked more questions, like, hey, how did you come to that conclusion, or what led you to that, or have you ever considered this? Like I just feel like those types of questions, just being curious over and over again, it's hard.
Yeah.
Being a good question asker takes hard work.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it's always worth it.
And it's always good because it's curious. It takes that pressure off of like, I have to have this rehearsed speech, like prep to go whenever the opportunity comes.
Right.
And you just get to be with the person. You get to love them. You get to ask questions. You get to find out more about their life. And I think this whole scenario that we brought up invites that, because we really don't know, again, what's going on in that person's life until we ask, until we figure out what is actually happening in their life. And I love that that question asking allows you to do that,
right?
And discover what the Lord is already up to in their life. Because again, we talked about processes. Like we don't know where we are at the process. Are they full grown? Are they just have been planted? Are they not even planted at all? Like you have no idea.
Right.
And so asking all these questions is a way to care for people, and it's also a way to just allow them to be the expert in your life. And I think that's a huge starting point, launching point. If you're like, okay, I understand I am a seed planter. I understand it's working the soil. Now what do I do? It's like, be interested. Be interested. I love that. Interested people are the most interesting people. Yeah. So let's talk about more maybe specific questions. You brought up a couple of them already, because what we see in this passage, all by itself, the soil produces grain, and yet there is an observable pattern. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. And you had mentioned, hey, we're going to be strategic with this. We have a familiarity with how things grow. We have a familiarity with what kind of soil, what kind of environment, and so we're going to put up hail cannons whenever we can.
Come on now.
We're gonna try to figure out what are the best practices to do this. And so let's talk practically about, okay, if I'm being sent out into question asking, what can I do?
Yeah.
And, one of the resources I'd recommend if you want to dig further on this is Tactics by Greg Koukl. And he's sort of an apologetic mind, which is like, hey, how do I answer some of the toughest objections? And so it might be more like apologetic, but this is just basic curiosity about people. And so I'm going to walk through those 3 questions that you just brought up and talk to us about some of the advantages to some of those questions. So the first one you brought up was, and that you read about in the curriculum if you're following along. What do you mean by that? So any version, any iteration of that question, asking for clarification, asking for definition. Austin, what are some of the advantages of searching for people's definition and what they mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten myself into trouble with this so much, just assuming that I know what somebody means, Like I feel like, have you ever been in a scenario where your wife says something and you kind of respond, like it's like frustrating to you or something, and you respond or react, is probably a better word. And then she looks at you like sideways. She's like, what are you talking about? And you're like, you just said this. And she's like, no, I said this, not that. And you're like, oh, like that changes everything. But I feel like that reaction is oftentimes because we think we know what somebody else is saying. So, I mean, I feel like most people are pretty bad communicators, like just in general. I know I am. Like, I communicate for a living, and I still, like, with my wife, I'm like, I'm trying to say something, and she's like, what are you saying right now? I'm like, I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I stutter a lot in this podcast or in these episodes.
It's hard.
I'm trying to communicate as best as I can.
It's really hard. Like, effective communication is, like, extremely challenging, and there's only a few people that are, like, excellent at it, and I don't know. I strive to be more like that, and I always want to get better with it. But I think like the fact, if we just assume that most people are pretty bad communicators, like us, I feel like we're good, but not great. Like we're trying to figure it out.
We're learning.
Thank you for your grace, everybody. But I feel like the question, what do you mean by that, is probably just always helpful to just like get one layer deeper. Like you hear somebody say something, and your first reaction is probably like, oh, I know what I want to say to that. But I feel like true listening, like actual hearing, is listening and then seeking understanding. And so if you hear somebody, it's like, hey, what do you mean by that? Like, can you help me understand this? Or I feel like just that help me understand language is like really good, of just, can you clarify that? Can you define that? Can you help me understand? What do you mean by... And I think tone is everything. I get myself in trouble because I'm a passionate human. And so like I can debate somebody, and somebody will be like, why are you so angry? I'm like, I'm not. I just really care about this. So I've had to like learn to like slow down, ask a question in a certain tone, because if I'm just like firing on all cylinders, people tend to shut down. And I want to soften and slow down and go, what do you mean by that? Like help me understand that, instead of like, what do you mean by that? Like that's where I'll get myself in trouble with my wife, right? She'll like say something, I'm like, what do you mean by that? She's like, what? I feel like I'm in court right now. Like, why do I have to defend every statement?
Yeah.
And so I think we can get ourselves in trouble with what do you mean by that? But I think there's also a way to use that as a tool to go like, like, let me think about that. Like, let me genuinely consider that.
Yeah.
I sat in it was like this little mini conference at my old church where one of the guys who was on the committee for the new NIV, they just like came out with a new NIV like within the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. But he was on the committee that took the old NIV, translated it from the Hebrew and the Greek and the Aramaic, and then they looked at the old NIV and they made a couple tweaks. Like if you have a new NIV versus an old NIV, there's like a few differences. And he said this thing that I thought was beautiful. He said like, no one should ever make a, like sit in a defensive stance for any point of view until you could defend the opposite's position. I love that. Like, I love that concept. Extremely challenging to do, but like, can you defend Islam? Could you defend Buddhism? Like, could you defend the LGBTQ standpoint? Could you defend a Democrat's or a Republican's perspective before you defend your own, right? Because I think way too often, I just live in an echo chamber with a bunch of people that agree with me. And then I find myself in a position with somebody who doesn't agree with me, and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, then immediately, like, your own talking points come out of like what you've learned, and you're like,
for sure, I'm just regurgitating something I've heard from someone else. And so I think the ability to be like a cognitive dissonant, like wrestle with a truth that you don't agree with, to get to the point of understanding, so that you really can lean into like, oh, I do understand what I believe and why I believe it, not just because that's what I've been told and that's what I've been told and that's what they've been told, which is a huge wrestle with high school students, right? Like I try to do cognitive dissonance with my high school students all the time because I don't want them to get to college and have some professor tell them to stand up and be like, this is what an idiot looks like because you believe in Christianity. It's like the first person they encounter who's going to be completely opposite of what I've been teaching them, or Sierra or Nash or whoever. Like, I want them to be able to wrestle with that themselves and understand the counterpoints and get to a point where they believe what they believe. So I think like that, what do you mean by that, is just a helpful way to understand in a quote unquote opponent, or, somebody that you're trying to speak truth to.
And I think it allows you some time to just be with the person, right? Because once you ask that, you invite them to share their own story. And I love what you said about how that it could get you in trouble too, because there's a, what do you mean by that? In terms of like, I'm about to stump you, like you don't know what you're talking about, like, versus like, I'm genuinely interested, like when you say this word, like what is racing across your mind? What's going on? And you'd be surprised about how many people haven't thought about like what they think about what they're saying. It's very surface level. And so that leads us to the second question that we talked about in the curriculum, and second question that you brought up. Where did you come to that conclusion, or how did you come to that conclusion? Talk to us about some of the advantages that you see in that question as you're searching for their methodology, what is the belief structured on?
Yeah, I think this all comes down to tone for me. Like,
sure, yeah.
I don't know, like if you pull a gun and you're like, how'd you come to that conclusion? Like,
It's not very caring, right?
yeah. But I mean, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? Probably the same question,
Sure.
just like reiterated a different way. Like, that's interesting. Like, how'd you come to that conclusion? Like,
It's like digging
almost
in.
like, what are your sources?
Yeah.
You know? And again, I think tone is everything in how you ask that question. Like I'm thinking about a friend of mine that was coming to 3CYA for a long time, grew up with a Hindu background, was in New York for a while. Now he's in the startup world. And I just had fascinating conversations with him where I'm not sure we even ever broached Jesus. Like, I don't think we got there. But it was just fascinating talking to him, asking them these types of questions. Like, whoa, what do you mean by heaven? Like, what do you mean by good person? Like, help me understand, like, with your background, with your context. Like, I genuinely, I just don't know. Like, I don't, where you grew up, what you were taught, your experience of church, temple, right? Like, I feel like one of my favorite things about Three Crosses is like the people that walk up to the parking lot that'll be like, hey, like, which way is temple? And I'm like, I love that. Like, I love that we have such a variety of backgrounds when it comes to like spirituality and faith that like we would do really well to ask these types of questions, even to the people that are at our church, just to go like, hey, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, help me understand. Like, what did you hear me say? I think those types of curious, just digging questions just help you. It's maybe like massaging somebody's communication, you know? Like if we go back to the point where like most people are just bad communicators, like how do you just like gently massage their communication, make them feel more comfortable so that they can communicate more clearly, rather than like them getting to the point where they're like so worked up and trying to like defend, where they feel like they're in court and like nobody does well on the stand.
Yeah.
Like just don't put people on the stand.
Right.
And it feels like that's what evangelism sometimes turns into, is like you were like cross-examining somebody.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I don't want anything to do with your God. Like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, get people off the stand and get people into, I don't know, like a sports bar or a coffee shop or like somewhere where you could just sit and have like just like a real life on life conversation with a normal human. Like,
so if you're hearing us and saying like, oh, I have to ask this question and this question, you're missing it. Because
it's not a formula.
These conversations happen naturally. We're just wanting to spark the idea of, hey, we are seed planters, we are tilling the soil, and we're digging into where people are genuinely to try and figure out what the Lord is doing already in their lives, right? We don't know. We're not the experts. And I think that is a crucial starting point. We don't have that knowledge. And so seeking that, being curious, I think Christians ought to be the most curious type of people. So then the third question here, have you ever considered? Why might that be a helpful way, a helpful tool in our back pockets in these conversations?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like that question could get manipulative quickly. You know, it's like, well, have you ever considered that you're wrong?
Yeah.
But I think it's the same tone of like, like, okay, like I understand. I'm considering what you're talking about. Like, have you ever considered this side of it? Like, you're almost like inviting somebody to, like, you entered into their world, you asked a bunch of questions, and then you're inviting them into your world. Like, have you ever considered this? Like, what do you think about this? And then hopefully, like, if you could create an environment where like conversation could flow, the dream would be when you ask, have you ever considered, they answer with, what do you mean by that? And then they answer with like, how'd you come to that conclusion? And then that's where it's like, be prepared, like seasoned with salt, like gentle, kind. Like, what does the scripture tell us? How do we live in such a way that's like so winsome that people would ask us that question? How'd you come to that conclusion? What do you mean by that? And that's where like, I feel like good conversation flows, like, which is really hard. And we're not good at it. It's much easier to sit across from someone and like both be on your phone, right? You ever found yourself on a date with your wife and you're like, what do we say now? You know, like it takes hard work, even with somebody that you love deeply, to go like, I'm going to ask good questions and I'm going to keep delving the depths of who they are. And like, that's hard to do with someone that you love. It's even harder to do with someone you don't know at all. But I think it's just always worth it. Like asking good questions, being interested, getting caught up in that. It's like, I just have never walked away from an interaction like that going like, that sucked. But I've done the opposite. You know, I've shut somebody down quickly and been like, oh, that was horrible.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm glad you brought up the step into our world as well, because a lot of you guys might be thinking out there like, man, these guys are soft. Like they're asking questions. They don't want to tell the truth. Like
Yeah.
they're skirting around the issue, right?
Mm.
They're not being confronted with the truth because in a lot of ways, what we have is very offensive. The
Yeah.
gospel is very offensive
Sure.
to the world. And so I want to read verse 29 and ask you a skeptic question here.
Yes. I've been
Because it
waiting.
says, as soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it. He goes after it because the harvest has come.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about crafting an answer to the truth in the curriculum, but what would you say to the skeptic that's listening to our talk about questions and just say, you guys are skirting the issue. Like you guys need to present the truth. We need to present the truth as Christians because, hell is hot. Time is short. When do we transition into this presentation of the gospel truth with statements that may feel like a sickle? It might jeopardize the relationship. And so I guess the question underneath that is when do we know the grain is ripe and ready for the sickle?
Yeah. Probably don't.
Lack of information, right?
Period.
We don't know.
The end. That's all I got for you. No, yeah. I like during sermon review, I asked Hannah Blankenship, I was like, hey, what was it for you? Like, because when did she come to?
About 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. So Hannah is super helpful for me personally. Like, feel like when I'm like, preparing a sermon or thinking through like a strategy for Omega or 3CYA, because like I don't know, she just recently walked through that in the Bay Area. And so I feel like I'm still new to the Bay Area. In my first like 90 days here, I basically threw away everything I learned about ministry in San Diego. It was like, it's just so different, like culturally. And so I learned so much as a pastor that is obviously like foundational, but like, I just think strategy should always be like shifting. We should be innovative in the way that we preach the gospel and come across. And so I asked her like, hey, what was it about the people that it was the Johns, I think.
Yep. Promoting grace. Shout out to you guys.
Shout out. And she said these things, and they're not rocket science, but she said like live a certain way, right? Countercultural living, holiness, if you will, like a humble confidence. Practice the ministry of presence. Just show up, like consistently and stay. Build relationships. Right? Ask good questions. Both normal questions and spiritual questions, right? Like not just like always, what do you think about this Bible verse? But like, hey, like tell me about growing up. Like what, I don't know. Like, hey,
tell
you
me your
just
story.
traveled.
Like
What was travel like? Like just asking like normal human being questions and then like demonstrate care, ask what matters to them, stick around. And I love this last one. And I think this is kind of what speaks to the sickle conversation. It's like, so when they're ready to talk, you're there. So I think like what Hannah expressed was like the feeling of emptiness that she was experiencing. Like once she had the bridge with the Johns because of all those things, like living a certain way, practicing the ministry of presence, asking good questions, the relationship that was built, the care that was demonstrated. Like Hannah said, when she felt like she was ready, she knew they were there. And so I think that's where she could probably hear the offensive truth statements from the Johns in like a tone that didn't make it less offensive. Like truth is truth. And like, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Nobody gets to the Father except through me is probably one of the most offensive statements in Scripture. It's an extremely exclusive statement, except for the fact that it's also the most inclusive statement. Anyone who comes to me, right? Like, I am the way, I'm the way, the truth, of the life. Nobody gets to the Father except through me, which means like anybody that wants to get to the Father can get to the Father through me. Like there's an inclusivity to that statement. So I think like the offensiveness, it's not that we dumb down truth or make it softer. Like one of my favorite things about Three Crosses is I don't think we're necessarily like a seeker-sensitive church, but I feel like we're a church that speaks truth in a really winsome way, which is different to me. Like I don't think we need to be seeker-sensitive and tiptoe around the truth and go like, we want people to come here and just feel extremely comfortable. Does Three Crosses want people to feel comfortable? For sure. But I also think like we are a Bible church and that preaches the Bible unabashedly and unapologetically, but in a winsome way, like in a way that's like, hey, like I want to speak truth, but I want to win as many people as possible for the gospel. And I think that's possible. I think it's hard. And I think it requires difficult work and preparation, but I do think it's possible.
Wow. Okay. That's a really helpful spectrum to think about, because I think about like holding grace and truth. Like this is what it is. It's like, how can I be gracious to the person, and yet how can I be a person full of the truth? And I feel like asking questions opens that door, especially to people that are really resistant, really turned off by Christians. It's like being interested leads to being interesting. And hopefully that opens up a dialogue. And once the dialogue is opened up, now you have some tools to navigate this grace and truth tension in a way. And you invite them to the other side, and you just pray and wait until you see an opportunity where it feels like the grain is ripe now. Pastor Danny was talking about pulling on different fruit, and just that's our role, is just asking if this is ripe, if this is ready to be picked off the grain. And so
that's cool.
I want to close off with some of the hurdles that you mentioned earlier on in this episode, of people that might still feel fearful, apathetic, anxious about this whole endeavor of being a seed planter, of being a person who is quote unquote an evangelist. Because we see here that this passage ends with the harvest coming. And I can imagine a lot of people out there saying, well, I don't know if I've ever experienced or seen a harvest. I don't know if I've ever seen somebody pray that sinner's prayer, or turn their life over to Jesus, or have that Hannah story in my house, or fill in the blank. I've never seen it happen. I've seen a bunch of YouTubers do it. I've seen a bunch of professional Christians do it. I've seen a bunch of pastors do it. I've seen church services where that happens. And so I want to end here of just talking to the people out there that are either listening to the sermon, going through the study, and even in the study, we assign them an interview project where they have to go and have a conversation with a non-Christian person and ask a ton of questions, right?
Scary.
That is a scary thing. What is success? What is successful seed planting, successful evangelism? Do we need to see a harvest every single time to say, Lord, I was faithful to the calling, I was faithful to you? What say you about that?
What say you?
What say you?
Oh man.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, what is success is like the question that keeps me up at night, right? Like it is why I can't run the same, like my team probably they're just driven crazy by my incessant need to like change and do something different, right? Like my my poor youth ministry team, I just feel like I'm always like, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And I think it's because like I don't know what success is. Like we had 160 in the room at Omega last night, or whatever, last Tuesday. And I just look at that, I'm like, it's super cool. And I want to pause and I want to celebrate like what God's doing. Like that's 4x what it was a year ago, a year and a half ago. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, there's 14,000 high school students in the East Bay, and the 9 high schools less than 3 miles from Three Crosses. I'm like, is that success? Like, it feels a lot like failure. Like, it doesn't feel like success. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably just like, I'm as competitive and ambitious as they come. And so, like, I don't care. Like, I don't get paid $1 more if there's 160 people in the room or 16 people in the room. Like, it's not to me, like the numbers or whatever. It's just like, it's the question of success. Like, what is success when it comes to the kingdom of God? What is success in the Bay Area?
Sure.
And I'm like, golly, like the very thing that's discouraging though is also the thing that's like probably the most encouraging. Is a friend recently said this to me. She said she was at a conference and they said, post-Christian always means pre-revival. And I was like, whoa, like that's cool. Because it got me excited, right? It reminded me of why I do what I do, and like why we moved to the Bay Area in the first place. Is like we wanted to be a part of what Three Crosses was doing. Like it was just so palpable that God was moving, right? Like I think Ryan Suzuki just said this to us in a meeting. He was like, we've already baptized up until this point of the year as many people as we did last year.
Wow.
It's like, that's success, you know? Like, and it doesn't mean we're done. It doesn't mean it's like, check, complete, but it's like, it's the farmer. I'm all in every year.
Right.
Like I'm all in all the time. And so I think that's like what I like about Three Crosses is we are a church that long standing. We're a church that has witnessed God's faithfulness over decades, but we're also a church with a mission, right? It's like we just heard Vision Sunday, and it's hard not to be like, let's ride, because it's exciting to see this, like, there goes the voice, this gospel movement. And so I think maybe if I could land the plane with this of just like, what if this moment isn't the decline of Christianity, but the prelude of something new? Like if God is reviving his church and he's inviting you to participate, like don't get caught on the sidelines. I think that's the part that just gets me pumped up is, I say this to my high school students all the time. I'm like, and Danny said it in his sermon 2 weeks ago he's like in Isaiah 6, when God says like, who will go for me? The answer to that question is not like, who will invite people into this room for me? It's like, who will go for me? Like who will be a missional agent? And I think like, that's what I get pumped up on is like, if my high school students or if like the members of Three Crosses would take that seriously of like, who will go for me? Like I will, here I am, send me. Terrifying, but also like, I'm going to go into my spheres of influence and I'm going to be curious. I'm going to ask good questions. I'm going to care. I think those are the things that get me excited of, like you said, like the tangible takeaways. Like I'll just remind our people, we're like, start a spiritual conversation this week. Don't preach, just ask a question. Like a spiritual conversation this week could be asking a question. Be present with someone far from Jesus. Like if you're not currently rubbing shoulders with or interacting with people that like don't love Jesus, start like find some environment, go to the gym, walk Lake Chabot, like, I don't know, go to the same coffee shop 3 times a week and just try to interact with people that are far from Jesus and then pray. Like, I love the Lord, help me care more about this person than about being right. Like, just express genuine care for another human being and watch your heart grow for them, whether or not they agree with you or not. Like, I think just the practicality of that, but the invitation to participate, I think anybody who's like within that new covenant, going all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, if you find yourself in that new covenant relationship with Jesus, man, I hope you can't help but participate. Like, there just should be no follower of Jesus on the sidelines, just comfortable with like barely escaping the flames of hell. It's like, if we really love the people around us and care about the people around us, and we really believe that what we believe is true, participate. Like, get in the game.
Yeah. I think these conversations stacked back to back to back about the hope that is within us, it just kind of reminds us that we still don't know. Like, we still don't know what the Lord is doing, where they are at in the growth process. You might be the one that plants the seed, and that might be it. You might be the one that scatters the seed and might fall on a different soil. You might be the one that's watering. The seed might already be planted. There might be something there. You might be the one that's providing the trellis of truth, just figuring out where you are at. And so, like, to ask what is success doesn't mean that you have to make a conversion. It's participate, be a part of this process, pray to the Lord, see what you can contribute to a conversation, lending an ear of love, building a further relationship with somebody. And what I find fascinating is that now all of us participating in this as a church, and we have all sorts of different people, all sorts of different personalities. Like, there might be somebody out there that's terrified to have that confrontative conversation. And yet right across the pew from you might be the person that is all about those confrontative conversations. And so we work together in this beautiful harmony of sharing the hope that's within us. So Austin, that was a really encouraging awesome. Conversation.
It's my favorite one ever. I'm not afraid to say it.
Yeah. So
also, you said pew. Your Baptist is showing.
Oh, man. Here we go. So make sure to reach out for the Austin special at Neighborhood Coffee.
Oh, shout out to Neighborhood Coffee.
Neighborhood Coffee. Here we go.
I'll get you a black cup of coffee. It's all my budget can afford.
And we'll be sure to ask a lot of questions.
Come on now.
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by Neighborhood Coffee?
All right. Austin, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir.